What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Make It Custom. I'm Carl Fisher, and today we are back on my 1939 Lincoln Zephyr 3-window coupe conversion project. This will be a 3-window chopped coupe when I'm done with it. It started out as a 4-door sedan. So yeah, really excited about this project, really excited to take you guys with me. And today we are gonna weld in these sheet metal panels with a TIG welder, go over the fit, finish, and how to get them to fit perfect so that you can weld them. I believe that the fit is far more important than the welding. If you have a perfect fit, it's much easier to weld. So you could be the best welder in the world, and if you don't have a good fit, you're not gonna have good welds. So that's what this video is about. Don't forget to like, click subscribe, hit notifications. Thanks a lot, everybody. Let's do this. All right, where we're at, where do we leave off? This panel is what we left off working on. Basically in the last video, I made the other panel on the other side. I also made the body line for the other side, then came back to this panel, kept working on it, and it turned into an English wheel video because I kept working on the panel to the point where it was a lot better. So, in this video, obviously we're gonna get this welded in, but before we can do that, I'm just going to finish up the other side because now I think I can get this side a bit better. So it's not gonna take me long, but I just wanna quickly show you, there's a few issues with this panel. I've got some track marks in it right here. If you can see, there's some terrible track marks from the edge of the wheel biting into it. And then the other major thing is, this is what I'm talking about with the last one, is like, this panel looks pretty good. You know, I was very happy with the panel, but then didn't really realize how far out it was with the gauge, the vertical gauge. My other gauge, it wasn't that far out, but with this one, you can see I've got quite a bit of a gap. Doesn't show up in the camera as much as it actually is, but we're gonna try and get some of that out. So we're touching at the bottom, we're touching up top there, and we've just got this gap in here. So what we're gonna do to grow that area is we're gonna stretch it out with the wheel. And you can see it's still there, and it's a bit there. So it's not gonna be too much, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on it, but until, you know, I'm not just gonna leave it like that, so I'm just gonna show you guys how I'm gonna do it. I was talking in the comments with Ron Covell, and yeah, I feel like I'm name dropping because he's somebody I really look up to with metal shaping. And I had asked him what tracking pattern he likes, and he likes a staggered stop pattern, which I've heard about before, and I wasn't really doing it last time, and I was getting kind of lines at the ends of my tracks. So what he's saying, which I've done in the past, and I actually talked about it in the past, but I wasn't really doing it in the last video, is 1, 2, 3, 4, so that you've got a staggered stop pattern, and it helps make it a little bit nicer. Another comment that I kept seeing is the diagonal track, you know, a 30-degree diagonal track crossing like this. Lazzy has a good video about that, growing your low crown sheet metal panels. So basically that's all I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go right in the center of where it is, you know, probably in a cloud like this, and I'm going to track across that. And then I'm gonna go a little bit larger and a little bit larger to bring this sheet out a little bit. And then this side will be tuned up. The other thing that somebody mentioned in the comments, and I do appreciate, is he said to set up the English wheel, the tension on the lower wheel. You set it up at the perfect point where you can roll a panel through, but if you tried to, you could move it sideways. So very, very, very light pressure on the wheel, and to run over the entire panel, it'll help release some of the energy in the panel, the tension in the panel. It'll also help planish the panel to take away, you know, little track marks without adding shape in those areas. So I'm gonna do that to the panel right now, and then we are gonna clean up the areas and start talking about fitting. All right, so I did do the kind of 30-degree diagonal technique. I tried to do a little bit of staggering with my stops. And I did crank up the wheel a little bit as far as I felt comfortable for pressure, because I know I was trying to really stretch this area, and pretty happy with what I've got. I've got a little bit of work to do here because I've got a little bit too much material or something that is gapping it out on this edge. But with the gauge, I'm just putting the gauge down here so you can see. If I hold the panel on with the gauge, it's actually got a bunch more crown in it. I did create a couple ripples up top here that I'm gonna have to smooth out, but just going with that diagonal pattern and a little bit more pressure with the wheel, I was able to pull that out. So I'm just gonna smooth out the panel a little bit more, try and get this edge down here, and cleco it back on, and we'll move on. All right, so we are getting closer, but basically it all looked pretty good when I tried it on, and then I just kept working it, and it looks really good in the center, but in between the center and the edge, it's a little bit low still. So what that tells me is that I need to kind of smooth this shape into there, or just bring this out a little bit more on either side of the center of the panel. So basically, yeah, there's a little bit of a gap there. We're looking really good there. And there's a little bit of a gap again there. So that just means I stretched more in the center than I did kind of fading it out on the edges. So I'm gonna do that, fade that out a little bit. And I've been kind of periodically lightening up the tension of the wheel and going over the whole panel to try and smooth anything out. Basically what I'm feeling when I'm doing that, and it's too hard to show, so I'm not going to show you, but when you see me tracking the whole panel really tight with my tracks, which you do see in the time warps, but what I'm doing is leaving the wheel so light that I can move the panel side to side like a subscriber suggested, and then I've got a little bit of pressure down on the wheel just so I can feel the roller going over the bumps. And when I feel that with almost no pressure on it, it seems to smooth out the panel quite well. So that is what I'm doing. I'm not exactly sure if that's exactly how you're supposed to do that, but it's working for me. So I'm gonna just do that a little bit, smooth out each side, and then I think we're there and ready to start basically taking off all this tar, cleaning it all up, and laying out our fit for welding. All right, I am ready to call that good. It is, it's not perfect. There's still, you know, if you look in the reflection, you can see a little bit of blah, 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 blah. But it's as good as I'm gonna get it, you know? Very happy with the amount of crown that's in there. I think the surface finish, that's the only thing that could use a little bit of improvement. And I think it's just something that will get better for me over time. It's just, you know, I went to the wheel so many times with this panel that I was kind of all over the place trying to bring this up, that up, you know, kind of everywhere. And the more experience I get, I think that I'll be able to get the shape in it quicker so that it's nice and even, you know. But yeah, anyway, super stoked. Now it's time to take out all the clecos everywhere, pull the panels off, and start prepping everything. So that is number one. If you're TIG welding, you must clean your metal. And I'm talking no mill scale, like, you know, it doesn't really apply in this because there won't be mill scale on a panel like that. But if you're TIG welding anything that is like a black steel, you know, like my welding table over there, that's got mill scale on it, you got to make sure everything's clean. You don't want any residue, no paint residue, especially no oil, you know, and no tar and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to heat gun all this tar off the backside, expose a lot of the metal, prep the metal, both sides, anywhere where I'm going to be welding. I'm also thinking about where I'm going to be hammering. So once the welding is all done, I'm going to want to be able to work, you know, a couple inches on either side of the panel to hammer it straight. So you're going to want at least a couple inches on all sides of your weld joints if you can. So that's what I'm going to do next. Let's do it. This is a dirty job. Lots of time lapsing. And go. Okay, we are finally here. Everything is cleaned, and there is a lot of cleaning. So what I did was I took all the tar off. You saw that. I used a little bit of grease and wax remover on this side. It kind of melts the tar off a little bit. It's nice, works pretty good. On the other side, I think I just scraped it all off for the most part. It's nasty stuff no matter what way you slice it. The disc I'm using, I tried to show it to you. I'm sure I did, but where is it? It's worth mentioning. I call them cookie discs, but they are just a paint stripper disc. This is the disc. You can get them in all kinds of stuff. You can get them for angle grinders. You can get them for anything. These are 3M ones that I'm using, but a bunch of guys make them. They're really nice because they don't heat up the metal and you don't grind away any metal. You know, if you're taking off paint, you don't want to grind away the metal. For the most part, you know, I've taken no metal away and just kind of bare metaled everything. So in here, I've got this sort of cleaned out. It would have been nice to have a little bit more lip on that, but we have what we have. And so basically the first step for fitting these panels on is making sure that my cuts are nice and straight. I know this cut looks straight. This is something that somebody might not think about, is when I cut this off, I just, you know, I drew a line and I cut it. But it's worth making this line straight, and I'll tell you why. Hopefully you can see how it's not quite straight. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a straight edge. I'm gonna scribe a line on here. I'm gonna make that straight. I'm gonna do the same to this one. All the lines, I want them all straight because that's gonna be my welding edge. So the panel side, I'm gonna have to cut that. So it's easier to cut a straight line than it is to match a slightly crooked line. That's why you cut those straight, okay? So there's tip number one. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to cleco the panel on and then scribe the line. And I'm gonna put scribe lines across the two panels as well as my scribed cut line on this panel. And what I'm gonna do that for is that once I cut them perfectly to butt them together, I line up the scribe line horizontally and then just touch the panel directly to it. You want your cuts to be so tight and good that you can just push the panel right on there. You know that that scribe line is exactly where that panel is going to be, and you just keep it tight the whole way. You know, if it starts to tighten up, we'll do whatever we can to stretch it a little bit so that we can keep going. But that's the key to fitting it, is that you have to be able to trust your measurements, trust your panel, trust your cut lines. So that is my trick, basically, is just super precise fit, and then you can just put the panel in. You don't have to worry too much about it flopping, because you know that that edge has to be tight, and then you know this edge has to be tight. So anyway, I'm going to get to that. First, I'm going to scribe these lines, cut them all straight, and then we're going to cleco the panel on so that we can scribe the panel. Just going to use a little bit of fat permanent marker to use as layout fluid. So we can see our scribe line. I just use one of these for the burrs on the sheet metal. It's called a deburring tool. You can pick these things up anywhere. I got this at either Princess Auto or KBC Tools. If you guys want to pick up stuff like this, KBC Tools, I'd check them out. They have all kinds of great stuff like that. And they have a promo code for you guys. Make It Kustom, all capital letters. And I think it gets you 10% off there. So yeah, go check them out. Here we go. Now we have a dead straight line that we can transfer onto our panel. I'm actually going to cleco the panel from the backside against this so that we can scribe along this edge, our nice perfect straight edge, onto our panel. All right, so we got this side panel back on, this quarter panel piece and the body line. Right now there is no cage in the back. That is, you know, the shape of it is the shape that's in it. That's what's holding it there now. So it's nice to see that that's fitting still kind of how it was fitting before. What I did do was tucked this panel in behind this lip so that we can scribe this line onto this marker. I did do the same thing here, but I actually overlapped this panel on top of here because we have to mark this out, and you saw me make a little template for that. This template lines up right there, and we'll be able to give me my cut line, that curved part of the bottom. But I'm actually going to go ahead and scribe on the back side. I can actually see the scribe just in the bare metal without using the marker. The marker was actually kind of more for you guys, but I usually just scribe like directly against the metal sometimes. So I'm going to be able to get this scribe line in the back here, this vertical one, and a starting point there for my template. And yeah, I'm really happy with the way everything's fitting. So I'm also going to scribe this out here, and then it's cut and we can actually tack it into place. I'm going to leave the top side for now. We're going to do this vertical weld and this weld first before we start cutting to fit this piece.
Start it up.
All right, I'm about ready to start tacking. So I've got just a little mark here. This little line lines up with my scribe line there. I've got these little marks that line up the top of the panel here. So by lining up the top of the panel and having completely straight cut lines here, I have a really good chance of being able to line up the top of the panel, and I start from one end to the other tacking. I don't tack in the center and then tack over here and then jump. I don't jump around tacking. I tack from here and I line up the panel from one end to the other and from one end to the other. The reason being is that if you tack here and then try and line up the middle, the orientation of the panel, like there might not be enough material in there, so you'll get one piece that sits higher than the other. So it's important to start lining up the panel one at a time from one end. That's like a really big thing for me anyway, that I find really helps when lining up a TIG welded panel perfectly butt welded like this. So if those things are all good, this panel should go back in exactly how we had it with the Clecos. That's the point of having accurate scribe lines, accurate cut lines, and accurate starting points, is so that the panel goes in right back the way it is. You don't have to push it in and out and kind of mess around. You just have to concentrate, or I just have to concentrate on starting at one end and just keeping it lined up. Sometimes the panel will have a tend to pinch and pull. I don't think we'll have too much of a problem with it because this edge has a little bit of flex in it being so close to an edge. But here, as we butt weld this, it may want to start pinching together because the tack weld will shrink and shrink and shrink, and it'll start to pull and pull and pull. What I like to do to fight that is when I feel it pull, or I see that it's starting to tighten up the panel like they don't want to sit nice together, then I will use a dolly on the backside and hit it with a hammer to stretch my tack weld out a little bit, and that will free up the panel ahead as I'm tacking from one end to the other. So I'm gonna grab my welder, I'm gonna get all set up here, and then I'm gonna start tacking this lined up mark down here, and the same thing on this side. Now, I'm using a 1/16 filler rod. I'm using 80 amps. Usually, as a rule of thumb, I do about 1 amp per thou, per thousandth of an inch of material. So if this is about 60 thou or 55 thou, I would weld at maybe 55 thou or so, maybe 60, depending what it is I'm welding to. This is a little bit thinner material. This is probably 19 gauge. This is 18 gauge, but I use a little bit extra amperage when I'm tacking because I kind of want to stab it and just quickly get that tack hot fast. And the hotter and faster the tack is, the less time that you dwell tacking, the less heat goes into it. So if you can do it hot and fast, it's quick. So that's what I'm doing. I've got a little bit of post flow on it. Some guys like using the huge cups. I like using them too. I just don't have the consumables right now to use them. They do help cool. You can post flow gas to help cool your weld, but I find that this is fine. So I'm just gonna continue tacking all the way along this, lining it up all the way down. Like I said, if I were to tack it down here and then try and line it up in here, you might get a little bit too much material on one side or the other, so it kind of oil can in and out. We don't want that, so we're tacking from one end, going right to the other end. Yeah, and then we're doing the same on the other side. All right, our panel is in. It's got a decent shape still going on with it. We have not changed the shape of the panel by welding it in. I'm really happy with the way that it fits. You can see it really pays to have a very tight fit so that you can fusion tack. You saw that I wasn't using filler rod for a lot of the tacking. Some places I had to. I didn't really have a choice because it wasn't super tight together. But if your panel is tight, you can fusion tack it, and it's just much easier, I find, because you don't have to have a filler rod when you're trying to fit a panel, you know. Anyway, one end to the other keeps it aligned. We did that on both sides. I did have to file a little bit extra on this side. The panel was a little bit large. It wasn't perfect on the first trim, to be expected, really. But now that the panel's in, it sits exactly how it did when it had the clecos in it, and that's good. So what is the next step? The next step now is to get more tacks on it. When I go to weld this panel, I will full weld it. I'm not gonna stop. I will weld, you know, the entire thing at once if I can. And the reason being is that if you can have a consistent fit of your weld so that you can use a consistent amount of heat while you're welding, and your speed of your weld can be consistent as well, which all those things can happen with a consistent fitting panel. Okay, if the panel opens up, it gets hotter because you have to fill it up and add more heat. So you have all those consistent things, and then you have a consistent weld, a consistent amount of heat, a consistent amount of warp in the panel, so that you can smooth it all out afterwards. So if everything is nice and consistent, we get that heat line that is smooth kind of the whole way, then that panel has grown kind of evenly the whole way. It's easier to work a panel that way. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to tack every little bit, then I'm going to grind the tacks and hammer and dolly that seam to make sure that it's all lined up perfect. The reason why I tack many more times is that when you go to weld it, these two pieces of metal in front of the weld will kind of do this if they're not tacked closer together. So that's the reason behind that. So I'm going to finish tacking this, and then we're going to full weld it, and then we're going to fit on that other piece, do the same process. Okay, the panel is tacked on. I did go ahead and hammer and dolly and try and smooth this out as best I can. That way I know for sure that these are both aligned nicely and that they will sand out. This side, because there isn't much of a way to get in the back side of this, I'm pretty sure I'm just gonna have to weld it, and it kind of is what it is. I lined it up really good. It's close to an edge. It's stronger near an edge as well. So I didn't end up grinding that. I'm just gonna go ahead and weld it. I'm also gonna weld that, and then we are gonna fit this piece. I'm actually gonna keep this piece on here while we're welding it, just so that, I don't know, if things start, I don't know, whatever. I'm gonna leave that on there. Time to weld that and that. I'm gonna try and go as consistently and as smooth as I can. Try and go, you know, at a steady pace as best I can. There are variables, you know, if there's some rust in behind, if the metal's a little bit thin, or if there's a dirty spot, it could blow a hole. Like all those things are part of it. And I'm gonna have to fill these holes as well. That's gonna take a little bit of extra heat. I might go in there afterwards with a copper backer and try and fill that up, maybe just a couple zaps with a MIG after we're done. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna go ahead and weld all this stuff up so that we can fit and weld this piece. All right, well, there we go. Panel welded in. Pretty happy with how it turned out. Doesn't seem like it shrank a bunch. I was looking at the footage. I know I said grow last time. These, the welds shrink. The reason being is that the heat expands, and when it gets soft around the heat zone, the metal pushes itself into the cold material, and then when it cools down, it has shrunk now because it has pushed some of that metal into the cold material. That's why panels shrink, and that's why heat shrinking works. Another story. But nice and consistent. It worked out well. This was a little bit tougher. You could see some sparks happening. The reason being is that I didn't clean good enough on the back side of this. There's definitely some orange, you know, crud stuck right inside there. I tried to use a wire wheel on the drill earlier, but didn't quite get it all out. But we did get it all welded up. There's a couple of pinholes that I foresee in the future when we're finishing this, but overall, everything's great. So, what is next? I think the next thing, I mean, I either hammer this now or I weld that other piece in and hammer everything together. I mean, everything's gonna shrink, so I think I'm gonna put the other piece in and then finish welding it, and probably end the video there because I know it's kind of running on anyway. And we'll make another video on how to finish these panels. Let's fit, scribe, cut, and weld our body line in so that this quarter panel is done. All right, so we are tacked in. This body line lines up pretty nice. Happy with it. Of course, everything is gonna get Bondo. I just want to, you know, mention that like this whole car, to be a perfect car, will need Bondo. You know, like no matter how nice this metalwork is or isn't, it will always need filler to be perfect. You know, like, I mean, there are guys out there that I'm sure can do perfect cars that need zero filler, but I would say 99.99% of builders are putting filler on. Same process for this now is I'm going to hammer and dolly and try and smooth this seam out as best I can, make sure they're nice and lined up, and tack every half an inch or so that it's like the other ones that I welded. And then we're gonna weld this whole thing, see if I can't go straight across. It's like a 6-foot weld or something. So right now what I'm doing is just kind of feeling for any high spots, any waves that are happening in the weld seam itself, and I'm correcting that with just a hammer and dolly, just kind of knocking it around to try and get it as straight and as close as possible before I weld it. Because if this is lined up crooked, then when I weld it, it will be crooked within the weld. It's a little bit harder to massage out afterwards, so it's important to kind of take this step. It's always tempting to just go ahead and weld it when, you know, you finish tacking and it looks like it's, you know, kind of ready to weld, but hammer and dollying your tacked seam now that it has, you know, 1/2 inch tacks on it, it will hold itself a little bit better than when it had fewer tacks on it. So we're hammer and dollying our tacked seam, and once we're finished bumping it around here, then we're ready to weld. All right, well, there you have it. We welded up the top seam. It worked quite nicely. The distortion is to a minimum because we hammer and dolly all the way along to make sure that everything's nice and flat. There's no waves in it, because if there was a wave and you go to weld it, it's going to kind of accentuate that. So it's really important. Take your time, try and do your best as far as fit, as far as accuracy and consistency. That is most important when it comes to TIG welding thin sheet metal panels. Now, I'm using a 1/16 tungsten. I'm using 040 filler rod. Before I used 040 filler rod, because it's not really common for people to stock it, I would just use 035 MIG welding wire. I would just pull it out of my MIG gun, straighten it out as best I can, and use it. The trick to kind of welding thin sheet metal, you're not trying to go for perfect, you know, dabs or whatever. You're not trying to stack dimes. It's consistency. So I'm gonna angle my TIG torch in the direction of travel. So I'm gonna pretend that my finger is the TIG torch. Almost like a 45-degree angle, maybe even like a 35-degree angle, angled forward. And I've got my filler rod right in front of it. I'm holding the filler rod right in front of it. I've got my TIG torch angled forward. And basically, I'm only touching that filler rod every once in a while. I'm not touching the filler rod like dab, 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 dab. I am basically running it, and then if I see that it needs a little bit of filler, that's when I dab it. You know, so it might not be the whole time. So you might have a little bit more gap in one area than you do in another area. Well, that area is gonna need a little bit more filler. So that's kind of how I weld it. Consistency obviously is everything, because the welding part really isn't that much. You know, if you have a really tight gap, you're gonna have a really easy time welding it. If you've got a gap that's varying all the way along, you're gonna have a difficult time tacking it, you're gonna have a difficult time welding it. So, that is it. I wanna thank everybody for watching. I really appreciate you guys. This has been an amazing project, and this video has got a bunch of progress. I'm excited. The Zephyr is moving right along. I did make a couple purchases for the Zephyr, some used parts that I will reveal to you guys in a future video. I'm excited about those too. Excited to show you guys. It's all in the name of getting the Zephyr closer to being done. Before we go, I would like to let you guys know there's a couple spots left in the February metal shaping class in Vegas with Christian Sosa, Sosa Metalworks. If you haven't heard about this, this is a joint metal shaping course that myself and my good friend, and I consider him a mentor, Christian Sosa of Sosa Metalworks, are putting on at his shop in Vegas. Why Vegas? Number one, it's easy to get to. Number two, he's got all the tools in the shop. He's got enough power hammers so that, you know, two people share a power hammer. I think he's got like half a dozen in there. That's where I got my Japhands power hammer kit. And we're using the Japhands power hammers during this course. We're gonna use the Mother Tucker hammers. I'm bringing some of those down to show some hand sheet metal shaping techniques with the tucking hammers. And anyway, links in the description if you want to take part in the course. We've got one happening in February. It's possible that if there's enough people that keep wanting to go, we might do another one in March, but there's no dates for that yet. So far it's just at the end of February, 23rd to the 26th, I believe. So thanks a lot for watching, everybody. Really appreciate you guys. Really stoked on the progress on the Zephyr. Don't forget to like, click subscribe, hit notifications, and if you're looking for another way to support the channel, $5 a month, you can be a custom crew member. That gets you a badge by your name, so you're easier to be searched in the comments. It also gets you 15% off at the merch store, which is japhandskustoms.com. Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye. Who's this girl? Hello. Hello, Susu. Hello. Oh. Yeah, you like my apron? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh. What's that? What is that? Who are those guys watching you? Oh, girl. Yes, yes. All the scratches. All of them. All the scratches. Oh, yeah.